Hey guys, welcome to the What is Bitcoin series. In this video, we'll outline how Bitcoin shifts the paradigm and brings about a revolution in trust. My name is Dr. Jagtap. I have a background in economics and I'm finishing my residency training in psychiatry. And because I'm doing it at Henry Ford Health System in Detroit, I'd like to begin with this quote by Henry Ford himself. In 1922, he said, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." And indeed, that revolution is Bitcoin. It's a revolution that is political, economical, social, cultural, and much more. Fundamentally, it's also a scientific revolution. And the idea of a scientific revolution was advanced in a book titled The Structure of Scientific Revolutions in 1962 by the philosopher Thomas Kuhn. During his time, the prevailing consensus held that science developed by the accumulation of knowledge through agreed-upon rules in a paradigm, and he called this normal science, where the aim was to discover what is already known. As a result, blind spots and unknowns were outside the purview of the paradigm, so the science was incapable of accounting for novelties or anomalies. And when many anomalies begin to surface, the scientific discipline is thrown into a crisis, which leads to a wave of revolutionary science and precipitates the invention of novel theories or discoveries, bringing about a paradigm shift with new rules and greater wisdom. There are many important examples of such paradigm shifts, like the Copernican revolution in the 1500s when the sun became the center of our solar system, and the model of natural selection which supplanted the theory of goal-directed behavior. In the case of this current paradigm shift, the Keynesian Revolution is relevant. It was driven by the crisis of the Great Depression that was thought to reflect a failure of the neoclassical model of economics, which understood that supply and demand in the market would maximize utility so as to attain full employment at equilibrium, critically without any outside intervention. So in the wake of the Great Depression, this model was scratched and replaced by Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes, the developer of Keynesian economics, believed that it was mainly aggregate demand or spending in the macroeconomy that drove employment, requiring the need for central bank interventions through interest rates and money supply. And while this worked in the past, over time anomalies naturally began to surface due to the paradigm's limitations. Roughly speaking, the economy operates in cycles of contractions and expansions, also referred to as booms and busts. And the aim is to buffer the volatility of these cycles so that aggregate demand or spending can be driven to maintain employment. So during a bust or a contraction, the downturn leads to a drop in employment as businesses and people hoard money as they expect prices to drop in the near future, so there's less money to go around. To counteract cascades such as deflationary spirals that can lead to recessions or depressions, central banks can drop the interest rates, making it easier for people to borrow and spend, or increase the amount of money in circulation to also facilitate spending. In contrast, employment is high secondary to increased levels of spending during booms or expansions. But during these times, irrational exuberance can lead to the formation of bubbles. So interest rates can be raised to make borrowing more expensive and money supply decreased to limit overall spending in the economy. For example, that's what happened in the 1990s leading up to Y2K and the dot-com bubble. Low interest rates in the early 90s allowed for easy borrowing and incentivized investors to speculate, which caused the Nasdaq Composite Index to rise in value by nearly 400%. This is in fact when the term irrational exuberance was coined by Alan Greenspan, the chairman at that time of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States. To buffer this, the Fed increased interest rates to decrease borrowing, and the ensuing contraction was followed by the early 2000s recession. Then, in order to again stimulate the economy, the Fed dropped interest rates to minimize the impact of this bust. Money supply was relatively unchanged during this time, but the anomaly here was that despite central bank interventions, the bubble nonetheless formed and subsequently popped. Perhaps the most glaring example of an anomaly is the 2008 financial crisis.